In this episode, I had a chat with one of my best friends, Mike Padden. He actually picked up drums initially because he really liked playing drums in Rock Band and Guitar Hero. And then very early in the process, he started off by getting like a mentor type person who he gives a lot of credit to helping him develop over the years. And Mike's kind of intense passion to practice and being the best you could be has motivated me a lot over the past decade or so to try to be the best that I could be as well. So we talk about his recording process, how he thinks drums are the most important part of any song, even if they're like hip hop and EDM, and how artists should pay more attention to that. We talk about the importance of a mentor as well, and just a whole bunch of stuff around that. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this video, and I hope you enjoy it. If you could, the way I usually start that off, you could let everyone know who you are, what you do, what you're all about, and what you got going on in your life.
Cool. So, name's Mike Padden. Andrew and I have known each other for quite some time, going on almost 20 years now that we've been friends. And yeah, you're thinking about it, but
Wait, really?
You put it yeah, it's
snap, we're getting old.
Yeah, I know. So we've been friends forever. I work full time in construction industry, but my hobby is drums. And I'm working on a project with you actually for a group day 4 where they have some new stuff where they asked me to start doing the drums. So working on the writing of that and the continuous writing of the stuff we always do together. So it's definitely my favorite thing to do is writing for sure, and getting ready to do some studio stuff. And I'm just doing some jamming stuff too. I just finished the Happy cover. So
oh, nice.
Maybe a sneak peek of that we can do for our next group cover. I know one of the guys recognized Faint. So I have all the recordings done for Happy. So
nice. We
can do that cover if we want.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as Mike said, we've known each other for like, what is it, 6th grade or something that you moved to Tewksbury?
Like 6th, 7th grade. Yeah. So like 10 years old.
And we had at first it was funny because back in the day, Mike was all about baseball. That was like his whole life. And I was all about music, which, I guess I haven't really changed in the past 20 years. Or actually, no, wait a minute. At first I wasn't. I didn't get into music for like the first 4 years. But, early on I got into music, and then Mike was baseball. And there was a joke that he said that, wouldn't it be funny one day that if I ended up getting into music and you ended up getting into baseball? And we were like, 13 at the time. So we were just kind of like silly talking. Yeah. And, what was cool is that at some point I got obsessed with playing Guitar Hero, and eventually you got obsessed with playing Guitar Hero, and eventually they came out with a drum set. And so I'll just let you take that from there, because I think the story behind you actually how you got into playing drums is probably the weirdest and most millennial thing in the world.
Yeah, so it's definitely unique, that's for sure. There's no like my father was a drummer, his father was a drummer. There is no one in my family who does anything musically. So Rock Band comes out, releases drums, and then Guitar Hero World Tour was the real big one.
Yeah.
And, we always were friends, but we never had anything in connection. I played baseball, you did music. There was never some overlap of something we really did together. So World Tour comes out, and you're the guitarist, and I thought drums were cool. And I remember it was right about the time I was getting into Dream Theater. So I thought drums were like the coolest thing. And I thought Mike Portnoy was like the coolest guy ever. And so I started playing the drums, started getting pretty decent at it, bought it myself, got a little obsessed with it. It was getting stupid. It was like to the point where it was like, I think I was top 30 in the world on a bunch of songs.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to myself, all right, I should probably play the real thing. So I ended up, Andrew and I's mutual friend had a drum set in Andrew's basement, and I bought it for like $300, brought it to my house, and started taking lessons. And that was like 11 years ago. So ever since then, I think it's 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Ever since then,
wow,
fell in love with the drums, and it's been a passion of mine ever since. No more Guitar Hero.
No more Guitar Hero. So, although
no more. Played it forever.
On a cool note, this is completely unrelated, but I bought an Oculus Quest, and I got it yesterday. Yeah. I've been playing Beat Saber, and it's like you're gonna love it. Like next time we hang out, I'll bring it. Because it's like you don't need a computer, you just bring the headset.
Yeah.
You're gonna fall in love with it. You're gonna end up buying one. But anyways, what you said about like you started off like all this time ago, and I started doing music 16 years ago, and a lot of people that I like ask me questions and stuff. Like they let's say there's a good amount of people who get in music in like a year ago or 6 months ago doing production, and they get disgruntled that they're not like making money or being like a super popular artist like within a year of getting into music. And a lot of people don't realize, like, I've been making music for 16 years and I'm just starting to like get success and make like money with it. And you've been doing drums for like 11 years, and like you've been in it forever. So I think that your approach to like practicing and sticking with it long term is something that a lot of, even if they're not doing drums, a lot of music creators and artists could learn from. So one thing I wanted to go into is, like, at some point in that journey, you started taking lessons and practicing. And you mentioned how it consumed your life. So it'd be cool to dive into that aspect of it.
Yeah, so pretty shortly after I got into the drums and bought that drum set, I started taking lessons from Libor Hadrava is his name. If you're into drums, I really suggest you looking him up. He's done some stuff for Modern Drummer. He's done some stuff for Drum Magazine. He's done some really cool stuff. And I always believed that I was so ignorant to music, I needed a guidance to it. I wasn't around it. I wasn't around people that played it. I didn't go to school for it. I didn't know anything about it. So I wanted someone who knew what they were doing to get me to the start and finish line. And I'll never forget the audition. So he asked you to play a piece, and it's like, what song do you want to play? And I go, Parabola by Tool. And he goes, okay, let's see that. And here I am thinking, because it was in Guitar Hero, I can just rip this song out. And he's like, well, some good stuff, but a lot we have to work on. And still to this day, I take lessons every week from the same guy. We've become very good friends. And I think that as much as my playing evolves, so is my teacher's. And with his experience, that no matter how much I learn, he's still one step ahead of me. So for me, that relationship's been, imperative to my learning on drums. And I know you want to probably dive into my practicing. So when I first started playing drums, I played 3 hours every day, which my sisters and my parents did not love because it sounded awful. It was like a bunch of bowling balls going down a set of stairs, and it was probably the worst thing ever. But my parents thought it was the coolest thing that I played drums. And so I started getting, well, do you want to go into practice habits? Do you want to go into do you want to hear that?
We don't have to go into like the specific like exercise you did, but I guess like the amount of time you dedicated to it and kind of how, the commitment and time aspect, I think, is what I want to dive into.
Yeah. So the commitment was big. I took lessons twice a week for an hour. And then I did about an hour to an hour and a half every day on my own for probably 5 to 6 years consistently. Maybe I tailed off a little bit. I don't practice nearly as much as I wish I did at this point, but you get busier in life as you get older. Yeah. So I would just do a lot of specific training, mostly geared toward independence, learning how to use all my limbs individually. I never wanted to be the fastest drummer. I just wanted to know the different styles and how to play them and kind of build the toolkit before I really did anything. So I think I took lessons for years before I really truly started writing, and just kind of looked at it as a sports background. I used that. You don't just day one play varsity. You have to learn how to hit a ball. You have to learn how to field a ground ball. And I kind of took that approach to the drums. I wanted to learn all the basics first before I really tried to expand and went from there.
Yeah, and the sports metaphor is very accurate. Like a lot of people think they can just jump into music and just kind of be great, but it's kind of like a sport. It's different when you're doing like the production side, because that's like a mental skill set, but it's like a mental sport. And then if you're playing something like guitar or drums or singing, it's essentially just it's exactly the same as a physical sport. You have to practice, and everything kind of evolves over time.
Yep. Yeah, there's no bearing on strength on drums. You could take the biggest bodybuilder around, and you could take a small guy who's been playing his drums his whole life, and he can hit a drum harder than that huge bodybuilder, because it's all about technique. My teacher went over things that I never would have thought to think about, which is where I sit matters. Physics and the angle you have of where you sit to where your shin and the angle of it allows you the most power and control. And the way you hold the drumstick to make sure it's at the highest bouncing point, so you have the most bounce out of your stick. Things I never would have thought of. And I believe in self-training. I believe a lot of being good at your instrument has to come from your own. You can't depend on your teacher, but I also think those basics that, like, oh wow, I never thought of that I never would have known. And I probably never would have found out, or at least easily found out, without someone who was that educated.
Yeah, like Libor has essentially been your not just teacher, but like personal music mentor over the years. Like it's not just about like the drum practice. It's been like every aspect of like music, I guess even music business, but like recording, your playing, and probably even like your personal life to a degree.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think that for anyone who's doing this as a career, I think any career, you always need a mentor, no matter what it is. You need some more experienced person showing you the ropes, guiding you, and getting you to where you want to go. So he's been that for me every step of the way, whether it be recording, editing, production, the writing process. Every step of the way, Libor has been there as a mentor to me in my music career. And at this point, the relationship has evolved from, okay, here's the weekly practice routine, come prepared next week, to here's what I'm writing. What do you think about this groove? How could I make this better? And then that's it. So now it's morphed from him telling me what to do to me asking what I need.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that makes sense. And since we've been making music together for forever, in some fashion, he's almost been like a third band member to us at times. And I haven't interacted with him as much as you have, but having him come over and kind of show me how he mixes his drums those couple times we did that, like that was a big learning curve, because doing physical, like actual like acoustic drums is like a whole different beast from what I'm used to.
Yeah, we could talk about that for probably an hour, just about the acoustic versus electronic stuff. But
I think it'd be cool to talk about Libor for a sec, even though like he's not here. But he's made his whole life playing drums. Like he's a full-time drummer, and like he has a bunch of different aspects. But do you want to give him some give him an intro?
Yeah, so yeah, sure. So he is, as I mentioned, he's done some training for Drum Magazine. He was in a band called Ramallah. That's probably one of the better known bands he was in recently. They're a hardcore band, pretty popular in Europe. They recently broke up, unfortunately, but as far as drum-wise, if you've ever heard of the brand Grover, almost all of those products were actually designed by Libor and made. So Libor, and then there was a company, Silver Fox Drumsticks. So Grover and Silver Fox were in Woburn, and Grover's custom-made drums. They do a lot of marching stuff, and Silver Fox was drumsticks. And Libor designed, and he was the production manager of those products. So he lives and breathes drums, and he's done some really cool stuff. And he showed me drumsticks. We use the same drumstick, and it's his custom signature one. So if you go on, I think if you go on Vader, you can see it. There's a shedder is the type of stick, a Vader shedder, and he has a custom brand with his signature on them because he has an endorsement with them. And I use his sticks, but he is definitely one of the most talented musicians that no one knows about. And what I mean is, when I say no one knows about, like, he is the quality of these top guys out there, but he's never been in that project. He just wanted to teach. I just want to teach music. That's what I want to do. And I'm just lucky that he happened to be that close and find him, and we stay connected ever since. But I don't think my drums would be the same without him. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I've never had like an equivalent in my life, I guess. Like I took guitar lessons and vocal lessons back in the day, like the local music studio. I guess at some point I did. Like for vocals, I had Jamie Vendera, but it wasn't as long-term and committed as what you did with Libor. And then like at one point, you won't know who this is, Mike, but a lot of people watching this will. I did Adam Ivy's mentorship program, and he kind of functioned for a while as kind of like that type of person that I could reach out to, ask questions about music marketing and kind of like be like, hey, I just posted a video on my YouTube channel. Like, let me know. And he'd be like, well, it's good, but your intro sucked and your outro sucked and your thumbnail sucks. Like, here's what you can do to fix it. And and then of course there's just people you look up to online, right? Like you used to be very into following like Mike Mangini. And Mike Portnoy before a bunch of stuff happened I won't name. But I mean, but like, if anyone doesn't know, Mike Mangini is the current drummer of Dream Theater. Is he still in Dream Theater?
Yes.
Okay. He's a god in the drums. Yeah. He's like an absolute god. But yeah, I think everyone, if you don't have like someone in your life that can kind of fill that mentorship role and whatever it is, you know, you can try to find people online that you use as your North Star, so to speak.
Yep.
Because otherwise you're just going to be like, let me listen to this guy, and then it contradicts what this guy does. So you're kind of always just going everywhere in life.
Yeah, in anything. If you want to be the best at it, you can't only look at what you're doing yourself.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that he forced me to do was listen to a band, Sepultura. Not a fan.
Yeah.
But he forced me to listen to music I didn't like. And that was part of my classwork, we'll call it. And it was, hey, if you listen in a vacuum to only this one style of music, so say you like reggae and that's your style. And if you only listen to reggae, you're losing out on opportunity from all these other styles. So he forced me to listen to all these different styles of music and said, learn something from it. Take something from that music to put into yours, make it your own. So I think that whenever you do, you always have to continue to look elsewhere, even to things you don't like, and be willing to learn and accept it and always have that open mind. Okay, I may not like it, I may not agree with it, but that's a way to do it. So, okay, that makes sense. Like I never would have thought to put that drum groove there, but okay, he did it and play it and go, no, that's pretty cool. Maybe I'll try that on one of my songs. Oh, wait, this actually kind of works, or a version of it. So I think that's a really important thing too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I don't remember what it is, so I can't shout it out. But they were talking about how they were like, someone watched Skrillex in the studio.
Yep.
And if anyone doesn't know, if you don't know Skrillex, I'd be surprised. But he's like one of the.
I know Skrillex.
He's one of the biggest, EDM guys around, and pop now too. But people were saying how he was incredibly fast at writing. Like what would take other people 10 hours to do, he would bang out in like 1. And they were asking, like, what do you think caused him to be that fast? Like, he's a young dude. He hasn't been doing it longer than some of these other people. And most of the people on the podcast were saying they thought it was that he was so diverse in his genres. Like, he came from a rock, metal, punk background, and then went to producing dubstep, and then went to producing pop, and then went to producing all this other stuff. So it's like he had this repertoire of material that even though it wasn't his favorite or his current project, it like inspired him on the current project.
Yep.
And you've done that over the time with your drumming.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done a lot of different covers and pop, hip hop. I did some jazz for a little bit, got into that. And I think that when you practice, I mean, maybe at least as a drummer, a lot of people, and I obviously this is an assumption, I look at myself, I had to work full time. That was my path. I didn't have all day to play drums, unfortunately. So I had to be diligent. When I had 2 hours, I had to maximize that 2 hours. Yeah. So if I came down and I just did double bass grooves for all 2 hours, I'd be damn good at it. But the second I had to do a double stroke roll on my snare drum, I'd be lost. And I have no idea what I was doing. And I found that there were ways to practice to incorporate those styles, and it just made me able to create more. So music, it's creation. You look at a grid, time. It all amounts to the same eventually. There's only so many spots you can hit a note, but they're endless because if you learn all those different things to incorporate in that space, you can create something new.
Right.
So I definitely think that practicing different things is important because you don't want to just be a one-trick pony. And the second you have to, get out of that, and a lot of music, pop, okay, it's very similar, but if you're into music like you and I are, you can't just play the same thing over and over. It will get old real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a cool transition to something else that I didn't send you in my topic list, but I'll throw out there.
Yeah. We're here to talk about anything.
Yeah, the idea of of things being boring if you repeat it. When I I do a weekly music review every Monday, and one thing that comes up often, and also when I review music online, is it didn't like evolve enough, or it didn't the drums didn't change enough. And that's one thing that I think I learned from you over the years, because with my solo music, I'm doing all the drums myself in a MIDI program, right? And I have to I always think back to the way that you would write drums in our stuff, and think well, Mike wouldn't play the same thing every single verse and let it stay the same for 8 times in a row. He's gonna tweak something up. He's gonna do something. So I always think as the song is evolving, even if it's almost the same, you want it to kind of grow and evolve and have things kind of have motifs and patterns.
Yeah, I think it's like if you drive down a street and every house is painted the same, it's like, oh, this house is kind of bland. But if the house is built the same, but it's a different color, it's different. It's the same. It gets the job done, but it's different. And I always believe that in writing, that you had to add something to make it unique and grow the song, especially as a drummer. I mean, you can take a guitar riff and you can drastically change what that guitar riff does just by the drums. I mean, you could play something off time, you could play something straight, you could do something fast, and all of those different things influence the music immensely. So I always wanted to make sure that I thought it through and built the song up to what it's going to. So if I was to play a very simple chorus, well, the first time I might play it on the hi-hat. The second time I might open the hi-hat, and the third time I might play it on the crash. It's the same exact rhythm, but it's on a different accent. Or I might add a crash, I might add a bass drum. I always want it to be what's the bass groove? And let's build off of that, like building blocks.
Right. And a lot of people, when they're working in MIDI, they're working on all these synthesizers, they're working on getting these samples to work. They don't put the care in their drums as much. And I think drums are one of the most important parts of any song. You can make all the music as interesting as possible, but if the drums are boring, the whole song just sucks. And I think you'd probably be the biggest proponent of that in the world.
Oh yeah, I am definitely the biggest proponent of that in the world, and selfishly, because it's my instrument. And also, I am so old school in the belief of you have to have real drum sounds. And there's a place for electronic drum sounds, don't get me wrong. And I love what that industry's doing, but to me as a drummer, I notice it, and it just feels different. There's something to me about just the ability to hit an accent authentically that I don't know if electronic drums captured it. So
yeah, there's ways to get around it. You can add accents and stuff, but it will never have the human feel of a drummer. Now that being said, you're not going to put you're not going to have an entire EDM song with acoustic drums per se, but
no, there's no point.
Right. But it's a good point that for all the rock and metal people watching this, it's pretty common to use something like Superior Drummer or Nolly Gecker drums. And while those are fantastic products, if you don't have a drummer,
of course,
I don't think they replace a drummer.
Well, yeah, I mean, I look at you as a singer. Your voice is distinct. Realistically, people have unique sounds with their voice. It's easy. Guitars may be a little more similar, but they have effects. They have things to do to make their voice. And I always viewed drums. My voice was the sound of my drums. And if you think of Danny Carey and Tool, that sound is so unique. And that tom hit, when you hear it, you go oh, that's Tool. And he created that sound because he's using a unique, perfectly tuned set. Now, no one has the time or money to record to the quality he does, but the concept is there. That sound of that tom that's not triggered, or that bass drum or snare, that's my voice, because I don't sing. I play rhythm. So I don't have melody. So that was always how I viewed making yourself unique, is giving it in the right music. Hip hop, those musics, the drum machines make sense. Superior Drummer makes perfect sense in so many instances, because who the hell can just record drums at the drop of a hat? It's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. But the last one of these chats I had, I talked to someone and we talked about how you can make music from home. You don't need a fancy setup, and you can do all this great stuff with a budget setup. But drums is one of those instruments where I don't necessarily know if that's true. I don't think you can record vocals with an iPhone and in the mix make it all work. I don't think you could do that with drums. I don't think you could spend $200. Maybe for $200 you can get something to get you like good enough for some projects, but
yeah,
you can't. Drums is one of those things you can't just like fake with a crap setup.
No, you definitely can't. It costs a lot of money to get a good setup. That's for sure.
Sorry, choking on something.
No problem.
Yeah, and I remember our first recording. I think we went to someone's house, right? Ryan? Is that who it was?
Ryan did my recording at my house, yes. My garage.
Yeah, your unacoustically treated garage.
Oh, it was the worst sound.
And then from there, we went to
Jason's studio.
And eventually there was...
Yeah.
And then eventually I think Libor would come to your house after that with his setup?
No, I would record at Libor's drum studio. It was a sound-treated room. I would bring my drums there until eventually I was able to get to a home setup point and do it that way.
And so that's probably a good time to talk about your recording setup.
Yep.
Which is a huge thing, and I'm sure people are going to be somewhat interested in the details of that.
Sure.
So I'm just going to let you dive into that. I don't even know where to start talking about the drum.
Sure. So my recording setup has been a slow evolution of years and years of buying one microphone at a time. I'm pretty much complete at this point to where I want it. I use two 8-channel Motune 896 HD interfaces. I don't even think they make them anymore. You can get them refurbished. So I have those two, and I run 12 channels when I record my drums. So I have 2 bass drum mics, 2 snare drum mics, 2 overheads. I have a 6-piece drum set, so all my toms are individually mic'd, and then I mic my hi-hat and I mic my ride. So a lot of control. Even if we don't use the mic, I like the option of having it. I use all Shure products. The KSM 44As are my overheads, and those things are absolute beasts. They're not cheap, but I would highly suggest anyone looking into drums to look into saving the money for those things, because those 2 microphones on their own is all you need, and they sound incredible. And then the extra stuff is just nice little detail work. But I use the Beta 181 for my snare mic, my ride mic, and my hi-hat mic. That thing is a utility player, another baseball term. That thing can go anywhere and sound good. It's a little tiny microphone about this big, and it does the job. It sounds amazing on snare. It sounds good on the cymbals too. So I use that, and then Beta 52 for my bass drum, along with a Beta 91A. So the Beta 52 sits on the outside of the bass drum, and the Beta 91A sits on the inside of the bass drum. So I can get inside and outside. For mixing purposes, I find we use almost exclusively the 91 sound, the interior bass drum, but we have the 52 for a little bit more of the boom. So the 91 probably gets more of a metally, clicky sound, and the 52 gets that boom. So when you do it like 90-10 in the mix, you can kind of get a really nice acoustic bass drum sound. I use an old school 57, like that microphone you could throw off the wall and it wouldn't break. Except you did break it once by hitting it with the drumstick. And
that's amazing to me, because I've seen people like throw them, like slam them into concrete, and they'll just get dented and work. But you killed it with.
I hit the 57 perfectly with a drum set and pretty much shattered the top of it. The whole thing just broke out and it was completely junk. So that was hilarious when I did that. And then the Beta 98 AMPs are what I use for my tom mics, just individually mic'd. They mount to the rack, and I can even show you kind of like a quick picture of it.
Give a screen.
So
keep in mind. Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Yep. So that's my drum set. All my microphones stay permanently set up. When I want to record, I use Pro Tools 11 to be specific, and I just do all my recordings with the 12 channels. I have 2 hi-hats. I have an auxiliary hi-hat, and I will shift one of my microphones if I have to from the ride. And I don't know if we'll get into it today about how I actually record drums, because it's probably a little unique. But I'll usually do pieces. So I'll break out an entire hi-hat if I need to move a mic, or I'll just borrow one from Libor. At this point, I usually will just borrow his and record with 13 channels.
Yeah, and having your setup there all the time has been pretty useful, because you can just be like, I can send you an idea, or you can have an idea and you can just be like, okay, I'll just click record and I'll just jam and cut whatever out I need. And for me, I have a similar type of setup. It's a lot easier to do this with guitar and vocals, but it's like when I have an idea for something, if it's voice related, I can just be like, swing, recording vocals.
Yep.
And if I need to have guitar, I like it's done in like into the computer. I don't have to set up like an amp. I don't have to break out this setup and do it. And every piece of my workflow I have set up like that, where it's instantly accessible, because like the harder something is to get, it's going to sound super lazy, but even if something takes an extra 30 seconds to do, it's a good incentive for you just to not do it. And like if you had to call over someone every time you need to record, like let's say it was me, or if it's Libor or something, like that's going to crush your workflow.
Yeah. Oh, there's been times where I sit at the drum set and I record something and I think it's the greatest idea ever. And then I play it back and that sucked. Yeah. And I just feel it's such a huge advantage, because I have an idea, I just hit the record button and then it's there. And the other thing that's huge is the quality that you can get out of a rough. It's pretty much finished quality. And I think you know that sometimes when you're recording something, and if the recording is terrible, it can make the idea sound bad. And you might not like a part, but when you're able to get a drum sound that's pretty close to the final, it really helps with the writing process, because you're like, well, you know, okay, maybe I just adjust the volumes a little bit, but more or less, or tune the toms, but more or less, that's what it's going to sound like. I like or don't like that. And you can adjust it from there.
Yeah, and over the years, I learned that concept of like bad recording can really crush an idea. When I would have an idea that I knew was like, that I loved, and I had it in my head, if I sent you an idea before it was fully done, you might be like, what the fuck is, because you won't hear the idea. You'll hear whatever it is that I recorded. And you've had that too. Like you've sent me something and you've been like, this, I don't know if you're going to be able to get it, because you're not hearing, like, I can't play it correctly yet, or I can't record it good enough. It's just like on my phone. And that's a common thing. Like if you're collaborating with someone, you have to keep in mind, like, you could ruin an idea by showing it too early.
Yeah, you can, because that first impression of that idea doesn't go away. And I've experienced that a lot, even with working with Dave Ford. I've sent unpolished ideas, and I think that I lose track of how long we've worked together. So with my illiteracy, when it comes time to music theory or those items, I can explain to you, like, do this note, and it makes no sense, but you can get there. And when you work with different people, they're not there. They don't have that chemistry we have of just knowing what the other person's going to do. So I definitely struggled with that a lot, to just like, oh, here's an idea. And they're like, no, I don't like that. And I'm like, you know, that was probably too early to send it. It probably wasn't polished enough.
Because over the years, I feel like I've developed an intuition for like, well, this doesn't sound good now, but I bet it's going to be great by the time it's polished. And like you can send me a pretty rough thing, and I'll know that you're going to go in and fill in like all those fills and write them so that they work. Or there's this part that I don't like, but I know you'll get that later. And I know on my end, like, man, if I send this to Mike right now, he's going to hate it. So I'm like, I'll edit it. I'll get it like mixed good or decent enough. And then I'll kind of have a rough idea of what quality something has to be at before I send it to you or Day 4, for example. And for Day 4 too, if anyone doesn't know, that's our band, which like it's a cool project. It's kind of like Linkin Park vibes, kind of like that 2000 style rock metal. And we released an album last year, so it's Day/4. If you want to check out the album we put out, and that was before Mike was on it, so you won't hear Mike on that one. But now Mike's in it. So that's going to be cool. But if anyone wants to check it out, go on Spotify and look up Day/4, because if you like Linkin Park, you'll be into it. But
definitely.
I just lost track of what I was going to say, but I'll read some comments so that I don't neglect anyone. Sure. F. Short says, great advice on how to handle drums. That's my biggest Achilles heel in producing music. Yeah, mine too. Definitely. In terms of like mixing them, it's the hardest. And then you'll probably agree with Transgressions. Said the biggest thing with something like Get Good Drums, that's like Superior Drummer, is messing with every single velocity, and it can take hours of editing, but that's the only way to get it even close.
Yep. Okay.
So I would agree with that too. And yeah, Saya, Mike does have a YouTube channel. What's your channel name?
Jeez, it's been so long. I think it's Mr. Padden.
I think it is too.
Is the official.
Mr. Padden. If you type in Mike Padden drums, you'll probably.
Yeah, if you type in Mike Padden, it pops up. So
yeah,
there's some photos of me when I was maybe a little bit more chunky. So beware of like a Patriots jersey that looks like it's painted on my body, but you know, we won't go back to those times. Yeah. So
yeah, but yeah, go check out Mike's channel. There'll be for the final video. There'll be links in the description, but there aren't now.
Yeah, there's a video of me talking about polymeters and like 3 different time signatures where I am just like the most awkward person in front of the camera. And I watched that video and I laughed so hard. But there's a couple covers, couple quick things that Andrew and I have done that we've never put out. That's just writing phases. I've never really like dedicated that time to the YouTube channel like I probably should have. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you stuck with it over these years, like you could probably have a relatively big channel by now. But you know, you had other crap going on. So
yeah,
like playing drums. And actually, so you mentioned this earlier about having to work and stuff and only having limited time to put into drums. You and I kind of have a similar path where there's a lot of people who will kind of risk it all, so to speak, to make music work for them, or they'll go to like a music school and kind of make that their only option in life. But you know, just like me going to college for mechanical engineering, you went to trade school and ended up getting into that, and then ended up being like a solid, safe career guy in the music world. So how do you think that's impacted your like music life for the better or worse?
Yeah, so for the worse, obvious, not as much time to play. I mean, I think that's obvious. You know, everyone who loves an instrument like we do, it's different than a job. Like no one like me, construction, you don't go to work and just wake up and say, I can't wait to go put that pipe in today. Like that just doesn't happen. So, but people wake up and go like, I can't wait to go play a show, or I can't wait to go play this groove. Like I love my instrument. So that was tough. But on the flip side of that, because I always worked, I always had the money to pay for the stuff I wanted to buy. So I was able to buy a custom drum set with solid shell maple that was awesome for me. So that was always nice. So I may not have had as much time, but the products I was able to buy, I'm not going to say cost wasn't an issue. Of course it was. Like I'm not rich, but if it was, all right, I'm going to work some overtime for the next month and then I can go buy an audio interface, or I'm going to work some overtime and then I'm going to go buy this new cymbal or something like that. It was a possibility for me where I wasn't sitting there waiting for a gig to come in to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And I think that having something to look forward to after work as well was always huge for me. So you can't work without a hobby. You can't survive, in my opinion. So it was always go to work, pay the bills, build a career, and then always fall back on, if I could choose, I would do music. But it wasn't do music and then see where it goes. It was establish a career, do that, and then maybe, who knows, online was getting big. It wasn't huge when we just started playing, but it's like we talked about it, I think it was a Cloud Kicker. That was like one of the first bands I heard of that was a guy, he was a pilot, I think it was. Yeah. And he just wrote the music when he wasn't working. And I was like, maybe there's something to this. And that's kind of how I got into it. And I've just always liked studio and stuff like that. So I've stuck with that. My goal was never to play shows, really. So it was just to write music and do it as a hobby, realistically. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and you and I have kind of always had the same approach to that too. Like, I think for both of, like for me too, it was also the Cloud Kicker story was very inspiring because it's like this dude is like he has a career as a pilot, but he's a insanely popular musician. And for me, that was like when I first started going to school for engineering, I thought to myself, well, this isn't music like what I originally planned to go to school for, but this is something that's going to enable me to invest in my music long term. And because it sucks to say, but it's very hard to get any kind of traction in the music world without some kind of financial backing, whether that's to get the gear you need. And like you can get by with very limited gear, but it does depend on your genre. Like hip hop, you can just a computer, some free software, you can kind of just make great hip hop.
A lot of luck too, isn't there? You know, it's not
there is a luck factor,
Yeah, because you could be the most talented person there is, but if the right person doesn't find you,
well, that can be true. There are some artists that are found, and that's like where the luck factor comes in. But for a lot of artists, even though if we haven't heard of them until now, like all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this artist is so huge. We'll find out that they've actually been grinding behind the scenes, and they've had like a huge marketing push for the past 6 years to get them where they are. And so there is a luck factor, but I usually encourage people like, don't rely on that. Like, go make your own future and get that career so you can do it yourself, like with your own investments, with your own funding. Like, don't rely on like, I have to get this label and sell my life away to them so that they can fund me. You know?
Well, you got to be persistent, because persistence is going to get you there. And a perfect example is if you get a financial backing and you're not dependent on the money of the deal, you're probably going to get a better deal. Because if you're like, I have to take this is my only opportunity, opposed to, well, I do have a job that's paid the bills and I put some money away. It's like, hey, instead of 5%, I want 10. And it's like, if you don't get it, then you have a choice, but at least you get a choice by that.
Yeah. And the Periphery deal, I think you heard about that at some point, where they get like a 50-50 split on everything, and all of their own stuff that they sell themselves is theirs. And the only reason they were able to leverage that is because they were initially self-funded, self-recorded, self-promoted, self-toured, and when the label came to them, they could basically just be like, no, we don't need you. And if someone came to you, like, and they're like, we want 95% of your revenue from the music, but we'll like pay for your recordings, and we'll like promote you. You probably just be like, what the fuck? Like, why would I why would I even consider this deal? No, go away. And then that forces them, if they really want you, to come back and give you what you're worth.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. And I did actually want to touch on one thing that popped in my head when you read the comment about the drum recordings. And I kind of want to go back quickly to that comment, if they're still listening, about...
Yeah, you can just talk about it anyways. Even though I don't know if they're here still.
But my take on the recordings is the overheads are everything. So I think when you talked about what Libor taught you, was you were trying to mix the toms and leave the drums in the front of the mix. And you realized that you got a better drum sound when you let the overheads do all the work. And then the toms, those microphones were just slightly there to add texture to it. So I highly suggest anyone who's struggling with drum recordings to buy the KSM 44As. They're $1,000 a piece. They're no small coin, but for $2,000, you can pretty much get just about everything you need out of a drum recording. And you taking that mixing approach, you want to use the overheads as the main event, and then you touch everything into it, opposed to the other way around, because you have too much going on. And a good overhead will capture everything on its own.
Right. There's been a lot of recordings you've sent me that have just been a kick mic, snare mic, and overheads, and they sound phenomenal. Like they sound almost as good as the final recordings you send me, with like the dual hi-hat setups and the individual tom mics, and like sometimes a dedicated ride mic. Like the 4 mic setup can be your final setup if you like mic it correctly and use good quality mics.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
And since we're talking about recording, you do have a very weird recording. So maybe not. I don't know how weird it is and like out there in the world, but you have an unexpected recording setup for how you split stuff up and piece it back together.
So I can't really answer. I haven't seen many people do this, if this is normal or not. So what I actually do is I consider myself obsessive in the studio, to say the least. There's been recordings where I didn't like how a china vibrated, so I took it out of the room completely and recorded the entire song without it, and then recorded it individually and mixed it into the song. So I always believe a recording was meant to be perfect because you only get one shot at it. So what I will do is I will listen to a part, and if there's an echo, if there's a ring out, I'll take the cymbal out of the room. And I actually, typically for more complex parts, I mean, our music together, more polyrhythmic, a lot of different things going on, I'll usually record stuff individually, and I'll learn my songs before I record everything on its own. So I'll learn just the hands and I'll learn just the feet parts, or I'll learn the hi-hat and I'll leave out the stack. And I find certain cymbals like a china type cymbal or those long ringy cymbals, they take away from other items. So you may hit you learn that as you play drums, like you can't necessarily hit a china then a crash right after. You're not going to hear it. It's not going to be worth it. So what I would do is I would take cymbals out or take pieces of my drum set away. So that way there was no vibrations, and then I would record, and then I would record the other half after it. And almost exclusively, the easiest thing to edit is bass drums. So I would almost always a fast double bass part or a double bass part recorded individually, even if I could play it, just for the purpose of quality.
Right, and that's very handy in the actual like production mixing side.
Yep.
Because that means that, you know, if Mike's playing normal kick drum parts through most of the song, I'll have a separate place for all those like really fast parts, and maybe they're more isolated in that separate one so that I can like process them differently so that they're more, I guess, intelligible. Because like if you have this really fast kick drum pattern, like it's not necessarily going to be, it's not always going to need to be mixed the same as like just a regular kick through the whole song. At least is what I've found.
No, absolutely. And different parts demand different things. So I may play the hi-hat differently. The bell of the ride and the regular playing of the ride sound differently. So if you have the same channel and the same sound, it makes it very difficult to mix that. And because if you're going to put one EQ on it, it's going to do everything. It's not going to just know to only put it on that one hit. So I always try to think of that for how is the best way to mix it, because realistically, no one knows the difference. And there's no ego here of, can I play the part for the recording? I won't put anything on a recording I can't play myself. But for the purpose of the recording, why not? Why not record it individually? It's way more time consuming, but I feel it makes the mix so much easier. And then you just condense the tracks and you go from there once you mix it. But that's how I've always done it.
Yeah, and it's made it easier compared to having to, all the audio nerds out there will appreciate this, but having to go in and automate channel strips or like duplicate tracks, you can have a different sound, and then sometimes you'll have to, with drums, there'll be a lot of background noise and bleed between the mics, and for most of the song that's fine, but for other parts it won't be, and you'll have to use complex tools like Isotope RX7 to whatever to remove background noise and hiss and hum, and the way that, like, when I get Mike's drums, they're usually a lot easier to deal with than I won't throw people under the bus, but another friend I have, if you're watching this, text me, man. But like either way, it's you can get by with just the consistent drums. You don't have to do the way Mike does it, but that's like his approach, and I think it's very unique. And if it's not, let me know, because I don't know anyone else that records like that.
Yeah. Well, I think most people are tied to an hourly rate, and we need to get in and get out. And I could spend 30 minutes just doing bass drum on one part. And is it overkill? Absolutely. I mean, for what? But at least you only get one shot in a recording. That's the way I look at it. So we might as well try to make it as perfect as possible. Yeah.
So what's your, I don't know if we've ever talked about this like personally, but what's your like goal with the music you do? Like, for a long time, it's us just been having fun with music, and we've talked about aspirations and stuff. But for people listening, like, what's your long-term goal? If you could work towards one thing in the music world, what would it be?
If I could work toward one thing in the music world, it's a tough question, because for me, music has shifted from like, I want to do this every day to I love doing it in my spare time. It hasn't. So I wish I had like this grand answer. Of course, I would love to play music with you and do that full time. So whatever means that is, if that's writing whatever type of music, I'd love to play that and have fun and do that. I love writing, and I would consider myself, if there was ever an opportunity maybe to be more of a session guy, like send me this track and can you lay down some drums for this type of stuff? I would probably have more fun with that than just joining a group to tour. I wouldn't tour unless it was a group I loved. I wouldn't join a group just to do that. Right. So I'd rather just sit in the studio. That's my favorite part, is the writing, and just go through that whole process. So I guess a few different things. I'd love to, in some way, shape, or form, do it. I don't know if I'd be a teacher. I don't know if I can do what Libor does. If I was a teacher, it would be more on the level of what he does for me, helping people write songs and in the production level of the drums, opposed to the entry level teaching. Yeah,
that makes sense. I feel like dealing with super beginners is a much different type of personality than dealing with experts. Just because I guess it just depends on where you are in your journey, and also what your tolerance level is for dealing with beginning stuff. Like I don't think I could ever teach someone, or I could teach on a regular basis people to learn how to sing from scratch. It'd be too frustrating for me. But like teaching advanced techniques, that's a different story. And oh man, there was something I was going to say. Oh yeah, so a couple months ago, I talked to someone named Tom Dupree III, and so he makes a full-time living off of drumming. Like that's all he does, is he plays drums. But what he does is there's a site called Sound Better, and it's a service where you go on there and you kind of like bid for jobs or accept jobs from people like, I guess, like me. If I didn't have drummers on any of my projects, I would go to like Sound Better and I would try to find someone like Tom, and I'd say, this is my song, this is what I want, and he would write and record and send me like a fully produced drum track. So for like you, I mean, obviously we have our stuff, and obviously there isn't an unlimited amount of time in the day, but that's a viable option. Like you could turn your drumming into a paying thing.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of surprised you haven't yet, honestly.
It's just been a time thing for me. It really has. I would never have someone reach out to me unless I was giving my all. You know that I'm a 0 or 100 person. It's either I'm into it or I'm not doing it. So I can't go in and be like, all right, I'll just lay down some track for you. It's like, no, I want to give it my all. I want to actually do it. So
if you see me looking over here, it's because a fly got in my room and I'm like trying to swat it away from my coffee. But yeah, you're definitely a 0 or 100 kind of guy. I mean, I remember just going back to what we talked about earlier, like you got into drums with Guitar Hero and Rock Band. You didn't just like learn how to casually play Guitar Hero. And then before that, you and I were playing like, what is it? Some Tony Hawk 8 or something?
Oh yeah, yep.
I mean, like essentially everything I've ever interacted with you since, I guess 20 years we've known each other, you've been like, have to be 100%, have to be best in the world. Which is like, I've never necessarily been like that, but it's like, I think it's a good, it's one solid way of treating things in life,
It definitely stopped as I got older and realized that, okay, like you can't do that for everything, but that was true. Like it was, if I'm going to do this, I want to be the best at it. I don't want to be, maybe that's the sports in me, the competitive nature of like winning. There's no winning in music though, which is kind of cool. It's like, there's no game and it's like someone scores more runs and wins. It's the journey. That's what music is, the journey. And that's what's cool about it.
Yeah. And it's a lot of people in the rap world, especially, kind of treat it like a competition. Like they don't collaborate with other artists as much, or they won't be willing to help other artists as much because they feel like they want to get better than those other artists or rise above them. And I've always treated it like the more people that you work with, the better your chances long term, because you help each other. And like, just because someone likes your band doesn't mean that they can't like my band, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
They can like both. And that's the cool thing with music is there's no such, like, you can be number one in the Billboard charts. It doesn't really mean you've won.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess the only exception would be, what is it, the fastest drummer in the world competition that they do?
Yeah, I guess like technically you're the fastest, but it's like, how often are you going to be like, let me just lay down this blast at 150 BPM? Like, that really is useless. Like, I mean, I love watching Derek Roddy videos, but is he really the guy you're going to and be like, this is the coolest groove I ever heard, you know?
Yeah. No, I feel you.
Think about the best drum grooves you've ever heard. Someone who likes music. Is it ever the fastest thing ever?
I think my favorite drum groove of all time is in Rosetta Stone by Tool.
Yeah.
That's, I
mean, it's a ridiculously hard part to play.
It is a ridiculously hard part to play, but it's not the fastest thing in the world. It's it's not the hardest thing to play in the world. It's just hard.
Pretty close.
Is it? Okay.